The topic for today, for the afternoon, is sipping sustainability. Here we will be exploring climate-resilient coffee species. And post-lunch, we will be tasting 11 different coffees and discussing more on each of the rare species. So may I please request the panelists on the dais? Mr. Aaron Davis, Senior Research Leader, Crop and Global Change for Kew Gardens. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Mr. Akshay Dashrath, Alternative Species Indian Coffee Growers for South Indian Coffee Company. Mr. Charles Dennison, he is an international development of coffee ergonomy, and he's a tropical crop value chains researcher. Thank you. And Dr. Surya Prakash, former breeding head coffee board. Mr. Matteo Pavoni, founder and head of coffee, Peacock Coffee, is brewing the coffee, so I was told he will be joining a little later. Thank you. Over to you for the session, sir.
Standing up. Welcome everybody to this sipping sustainability session this afternoon. It's exciting for me, so I hope it's going to be exciting for everybody here. It's probably the largest, well, it is the largest alternative species cupping ever, as far as I'm aware. We've done this a few times before. The first time was about 10 years ago, but we have a much greater diversity of coffees for you this afternoon. And I think it's going to run something like this. We're going to serve the coffees one at a time. And for those of us associated with the coffee in some way, we will provide an introduction about who's grown the coffee, where it's come from, processing, etc., and anything else we can remember. What I don't think we are going to do is tell you about the coffee. We want you to make your own minds up about the coffee. Now, before we start, I think it's important to say this is different. There's going to be some unexpected sensory experiences this afternoon. I would also say be kind to the coffees. A lot of these coffees are very early stage. So we're not talking about coffees that have been produced to a high level for a long time. You're not going to get Geisha Panama this afternoon. And in some cases, these coffees have been produced by producers who haven't produced specialty coffee before, or Robusta producers producing coffee using very simple post-harvest processing and suboptimal harvesting. So keep an open mind. Be kind to us, be kind to the coffees. And what I think is really important is for you to experience them, to engage with the coffee, and to feed back to us, how you feel about the coffee, where you think it might sit within coffee. And some of the coffees this afternoon are going to be niche, and some of them are going to be on the larger commercial scale. So bear that in mind as well. Anything else I should add? Akshay?
I think that's great, Dr. Davis. Thank you. I guess we can get started discussing on why we are exploring alternate species of coffees. I mean, if yourself, you can add why you started on exploring.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. Thank you. So I think it's two main reasons. One is to understand the potential of these coffees for climate resiliency adaptation. So that, that's the title of the cupping session. But also, I think there's a real opportunity here to bring more variety to the sensory experience for coffee. And many, many years ago, I had interest from many baristas wanting something new, and that's what drives coffee, isn't it? It's innovation. So it's great to be at this kind of stage where we actually have some of these coffees for many people to experience. So yeah, there's two things. It's about the enjoyment of coffee, but also about the sustainability.
Charles, you've been growing Racemosa now for a while, right? Can you tell us why you started on exploring Racemosa? I mean, traditionally most coffee growers would go down the Arabica or Robusta route, so you've sort of taken an unbeaten path.
Thank you, Akshay, and to Kamal and yourself for getting us all together here with these unique coffees. I think we're all part of history here in this room, being the biggest species cupping and what we believe is of all time. That's very exciting. In terms of my Racemosa journey, I think I was just very lucky to be in the coffee trade and to realize on my doorstep we had an indigenous coffee. And when the coffee industry started to reach the excitement of where we are now, was just as I was starting in coffee, and I just thought, geez, what an unbelievable opportunity. So we went to Mozambique and to the coastal forests of South Africa to look for specimens of this coffee in the wild, which was quite a journey. In the early days, there were still plenty of landmines in Mozambique, and we had a couple of close calls there. And we managed to finally get some seeds and some seedlings that we brought back. And we have been farming now for only really about 4 or 5 years. But it's a difficult crop. We still have no information on it. We know it was once farmed commercially by the colonial Portuguese, maybe over 100 hectares of it. But that data was all destroyed during the end of the colonial times. And so we have no idea when our trees reach maturity. We have no idea what the yield is per tree. At the moment, we're getting 50 grams per tree, which is really tiny. We cheekily, and maybe it's correct, maybe it's not, we sell it as the world's rarest coffee. There's a long way to go for it, but it's really, we feel like we're pioneers, and it's just so exciting. And then along with the scientific research done by Dr. Aaron and his team, just to know that there might be a potential for the use of these coffees. Racemosa is extremely drought tolerant. We have 500 millimeters of rain per annum, which is probably about a third of what you have in your coffee growing regions here. So there might be traits of it that are useful. I think in terms of being a commercial coffee, I don't think, and I say this as the grower, I don't think it will ever be a commercial coffee. It will always be niche. In its pure form, it yields so little, and you will see today when you taste it, it's a very different tasting coffee. As Aaron asked you, please open your minds. We're not tasting another Arabica with another fancy fermentation. We're tasting a new species, many new species, and they are so different. And I think always the first time you taste them, it's a bit of a shock to the system. I think it's one of those things that you learn to really appreciate, like some other things that we drink maybe. But it's for us, it's very exciting. Every year we're doubling our production. I mean, this last year we produced a whole 100 kilograms, we reached triple digits. So we're very excited. And I'm excited that we get to share it with you, and just to hear your taste note. We have so many differing opinions of it. So please be honest with us, be kind, as Aaron asked, but be honest as well. Tell us if you think it tastes like whatever you think it tastes like. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Surya Prakash. So I think we can all agree that CCRI has one of the strongest breeding teams, and we've been doing some really good breeding work with different species since the 20s. Yeah. And a lot of these species that we're seeing today are already growing and have been studied at CCRI. A lot of the species that are going to be on the table today have been harvested from the CCRI blocks. Can you tell me what you feel personally is your favorite project which you can talk about?
good afternoon to all the participants of this very interesting workshop. At the outset, I would like to thank and congratulate Mr. Akshay and Komal for pushing me to this particular venue. In fact, maybe I'm a hard man out because I didn't have much exposure regarding the cupping and other things, but maybe I'm working in the behind the screen. I'm a person who developed the varieties. In fact, as far as the species what we are talking about, because even the publications what published by Anna Davis, we always used as a literature all these days, but now the commercial implications of this study now we are trying to understand. As far as the Indian breeding program is concerned, most of the people know that our primary mandate was leaf rust resistance. We started our breeding program for rust resistance because in 1920s, India must be the pioneer institute which has developed rust resistant lines. So in the course of this process, we introduced some of the exotic collections, both in terms of Arabica and also the diploid species. So most of these collections are confined to the gene bank, not to the commercial cultivation, except Libericas. Okay, the Libericas were introduced from Java base when the Arabicas were threatened with the leaf rust incidence, and simultaneously the Liberica as well as Robusta. And then the co-cultivation of these two varieties resulted in the occurrence of several spontaneous interspecific hybrids. So that formed the basis for our breeding program for rust resistance, and we have taken forward, and we could able to succeed in developing some of the initially for some of the Liberica intragrested lines for commercial cultivation. So maybe most of the people may be knowing the Indian standard variety S7 and 5, which is a Liberica intragrested line, which was very popular, and also it was released sometime late 1940s, and then up to 1960s, this variety could able to sustain the commercial cultivation. When the 795 started showing the susceptibility to the rust. And then we were also exploring parallelly from the international sources some of the diploid species like the Racemosa and also the Kingensis, and all these type of species have been introduced to India. And we also, 1960s, we did extensive interspecific breeding programs for improving the quality of Robustas. And in that sense, one of our success, because we do have several success and also large disappointments with respect to interspecific hybrids. I will share later on when the appropriate time. But as of now, most of this, the very, very important aspect that pushed me here is that the climate resilience and climate adaptation, okay, which most of the Indian coffee growers are concerned about this one, and also the experiencing, because initially we thought that the shade grown cultivation may not be much impacted by the climate change implications, but unfortunately we too are facing several constraints in the shifting of the rainfall pattern and the quantum of rainfall, distribution of rainfall, and also the rise in temperatures since during summer months. All these type of climate vagaries are seen. So everybody is interested about the climate resilience and also climate adaptation. So these two words are very fascinating for me in the coffee sector in India. So we too have to grow along with that, and how best we can able to use this type of resources for developing the commercial varieties. In that sense, we too have some successes in terms of commercializing our diploid interspecific hybrid between Liberica and Eugenioides, which the derivatives of these particular hybrids also will be tasted now today. And you have to tell me how these differ from the pure Arabicas and also the species like Racemosa. And lastly, I would like to stress upon another very successful interspecific hybrid. We commercialized the Kingensis robusta, which was known as Kangusta in Indonesia during 1950s, but we didn't hear much about its commercialization in Indonesia. But in India, we developed a commercial line. It's very popular and very, very having an intrinsic cup characteristics. And even physical appearance, if you look at the wash it see into our hybrid, it looks like almost Arabica. Then with a bold bean size and also the physical appearance. So it is also an interesting entry for this particular cupping session. And I look forward for your feedback on the cup quality characteristics, and then we'll further go to the breeding program. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Surya Prakash. Dr. Mandapa, which coffee have... Right. Dr. Davis?
Yeah. So not all of you have got the coffee yet. This is from growers in South Sudan, the Equatorial Teak Company. It's very early stage. This is from a 2018 planting. So you'll see the bean size. It's quite small at the moment. It's a semi-washed coffee. It was produced at the end of last year, so it's getting a little bit aged. And I think I should point out, and I made this point in my talk this morning, is that this isn't academia or an intervention agency telling people to grow these coffees, apart from the ones that have been produced here in India, the ones from the research station. These are actually in production. So this is from a 1,000 hectare estate in South Sudan, and they have about 1,000 outgrowers. And the reason they're working with Excelsa is Arabica wouldn't really grow there long term, and the local counterparts didn't want to grow Robusta because the value wasn't there. So they went for Excelsa, and they've gone for it at some considerable scale. I've been told their projected output in 5 years' time is going to be 500, probably 750 metric tons. So this is a high-producing container filler coffee, if you like. It's quite old in the roast. It's been sitting around a long time. It was roasted in Uganda, actually. So it's quite a light roast, a medium roast, but I think it works best with an espresso roast for espresso-based drinks. And I serve this to a number of people who are not coffee specialists, they're not cuppers, they're general coffee drinkers, and they don't know they're not drinking Arabica or an Arabica Robusta blend, which is, for me, is quite exciting. So I had a journalist come to us a few weeks ago. We went for a cup of coffee, we had our coffee, and she said, "What does this Excelsa taste like?" And I said, "Well, you just had some." And she said, "I didn't notice the difference." I said, "Well, that's exactly where we want to be." Now, it will cup high. We've had some 84.5s on Q grade, and 84.5s in R grade as well. And, not for this coffee, but for the Ugandan one, which I think we'll be tasting next. That's just the next one. What else can I tell you? I think that's about it. Yeah. Any feedback at this point? Yeah. This coffee. So this was, I think, produced December 2022, maybe January 2023. It's, as I say, it's unscreened. I should have pointed that out. It's not had a lot of intervention at all. And the guys that are growing it are new to coffee. I should point that out. They're not coffee people. They grow teak. No post-harvest processing. It was roasted about 2 months ago. But so as I say, it's all very early stage. But what we're finding is that the resting period post-roast needs to be at least a week. And I cut this last week, and I was actually quite surprised how well it performed in the cup. The fully washed coffees, the fully washed Excelsas, we're working with in Uganda, and we're not doing a lot, are cleaner and sweeter. A lot of demerara sugar and stevia, caramel, plum, dark fruits. Yes. Yeah, so again, they're very new to coffee. We've actually, I think, the best Excelsas we've had are from naturals, to be honest. But it just cuts down the risk factor. You know, we've had consistency is just easier to achieve. So in Uganda, we're working with, there are 200 farmers growing Excelsa. We're working with 15, and out of those 15, you might get 2 who just, it's just awful. And again, it's very difficult to ensure the quality and the consistency over multiple farms. But we hope to be improving on that as we go forward. So yeah, that's a really good point. This is really low. This is 900 meters. The caffeine is low, 0.8 to 1.2. Yeah, it's a mild coffee, but yeah, so in the same region, Robusta has to be irrigated. This doesn't. That's what excites us about this coffee, that, you know, it doesn't require those extra inputs. Okay, so we're now on to the Ugandan.
So, if you could inform us, please, what are the main characteristics of Excelsa as a bean? So, like in general,
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of work around understanding what Excelsa is and what Liberica is and what other Libericoid type of coffees are. Liberica and Excelsa actually, particularly in fruit, are very different. The fruit is Arabica sized, has a thin pulp, it has a reasonable outturn, 7 to 1, maybe 6 to 1 in some types. It's comparable with some Arabicas. And I should have put my slides, but the bean size is the same. You might see it in the cupping trays. Taste it. The bean size is the same as Arabica. Whereas in traditional Liberica, it's long, big bean, huge fruit, lots of pulp, very low outturn. You'll need 100 grams of fresh cherry to produce 8 kilograms of coffee, maybe 10. Yeah, and that's the main constraint. Liberica is very productive, but it's that conversion from fresh fruit to clean coffee that is really not working in the Philippines and Malaysia, and that's something we're discussing at the moment. But it's an easy win. You know, it's not that to make that shift isn't a great challenge, I would say. But in terms of the whole plant, you know, Liberica and Excelsa can be 10, 15, 20 meters tall. And some of the plants are, you know, they're substantial. They're real trees. But it can be capped at 2 or 3 meters, or pruned in other ways. So it's manageable, but it does need more space. The planting distances are far greater. Just going to pass you over to Akshay, who's I think the only Excelsa producer in India.
Is it the Indian? Right. Right, so a short story about the Excelsas before I tell you more about our particular Excelsas. Now, I never really drank coffee. I come from a very traditional coffee growing family. My grandparents rarely drank coffee except when in public. It was usually tea. But every vacation when I spent time with them, that's the only time I'd actually drink coffee. And Granddad would give me our Excelsas to drink, and he'd say this is the best coffee in the world, but I'm not sure why the market doesn't like it, so we don't sell it. And later I realized the only reason, you know, there was Excelsa at home was because he wasn't selling it since there's no commodity market. When Komal first started looking at exporting coffees in 2015, we took some washed Excelsas to the UK, and the feedback wasn't great initially. Again, harvesting wasn't ideal. And we revisited again in about 2017-18, and slowly we started building our Excelsa exports. Now, we mainly lived in the UK, and we'd come back for harvest and sometimes in the summer. And one thing that was quite obvious is during the hot months, during the summer months, you have your Robustas wilting, you have your Arabicas wilting, but you never really see your Excelsas wilting. So that got me thinking, and we started sort of working harder on the Excelsas because it looked to be heat tolerant, drought tolerant, and my research online sort of led me to Dr. Davis's research. And I mean, my granddad always called this Excelsas, but then we were sort of confused. Is it Liberica? Is it Excelsa? But in the last couple of years, we've had it DNA tested. It's Excelsas. We've also identified Excelsas which have certain different characteristics. Some have better outturns, some have better cup quality, and now we're working on propagating that. Now, what you're going to be tasting is a bulked up multiple variety of Excelsas that we've got. Our family farms probably do about 12,000 kilos of Excelsa fruit a year, and all of it's gone into specialty. Our caffeine content in our Excelsas is at 0.9. The outturns of this particular lot is about 8.5 kilos of fruit will give you 1 kilo of clean. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? No, it's basically fruit straight to clean. So naturals, wash, doesn't really matter.
Can I supplement some of these?
Please, Doctor. What is that?
Yeah, as far as the India is concerned, that no, maybe sometimes it's a bit difficult to distinguish Excelsa and Liberica. Maybe, I don't know, Anand has to tell that based on the earlier molecular studies or some publications from IRD, from Philip group, that they used to say that Liberica and Liberica variety, and also Liberica deveveri, which is known as Excelsa. Maybe that is the thing what they used to say. If you look at phenotypically, that means the appearance of the plants, you may see that in Liberica we may have that little narrow life of leaves, what we were told by my predecessor breeders. Excelsa is a little broader leaf. And also another small difference what we could observe the maturated stage. In Liberica matures a little earlier than the Excelsa types. So other than that, maybe sometimes in the commercial plantations what they told by Dashrath, that these are all known, it's very difficult to distinguish. And no, the custom was, the tradition was that most of the times we used to cultivate these Excelsa and Libericas in the estate fences, because those days the concept was that the Excelsa was showing tolerance to leaf rust. If you have in the border of the estate, the leaf rust cannot come in like that. At least it acts as a physical barrier. That was the reason why the earlier they used to grow in them. Predominantly we see in Indian plantations. And I do agree that when I joined the coffee board in early 90s, late 80s, I could see still the commercial plantations of Liberica or Excelsa in near our research station. But later on they sold, it is difficult to market this particular product, Liberica, as an exclusive coffee. They used to mix with Robusta also sometimes. Like that is slowly discouraged. And another negative aspect in the sense that what we discouraged Liberica or Excelsa, and even in estate fences, is the introduction of berry borer. Initially with India we don't have berry borer, but in late 90s we had the berry borer. That's why in order to stop the cycle, because if you have Liberica or Excelsa on estate, we have a continuity of this, because this berry borer survives only a coffee bean. After the harvest of Arabica and Robusta, then this matures by sometime during May. So the April, May also still we used to have fruits that harbors the berry borer. That's the reason why we even encouraged the growers to knock off the Liberica and Libericas and Excelsas from the even estate fences. That's why that, but of late, again, people are looking at some of the interesting growers, because as you all know that the Indian coffee is moving from the commodity to specialty coffees, and then a lot of international roasters and also the cuppers, they are coming to India and also they are tasting, and there is some increasing market in Malaysia and some of the Asian, what we could see interactions from the traders. So that is the thing. Now again, there is a reinvention of Liberica in terms of all the Excelsa types for the as a specialty coffee. I think that is the one small information I would like to apprise the audience. Thank you.
So just we're getting a little bit confused up here because we're not getting them at the same time. But just to add that the Ugandan was a natural 1100 meters, and now we're on Racemosa. Is that correct, Kamal? Yeah, we're on Racemosa.
Akshay, can I ask a question? What did the Indian Excelsa cup at?
Well, we've got again. There is no official cupping system for Excelsas. However, we've seen between 74 and 84. On which scale, I'm really not sure. Can you help with that, Dr. Davis? When we've cupped the Excelsas, and the points of what we've got here is very similar to what yourself or and it goes between 74 and 84. So how would
So when our first Excelsas cupped at like 40 and 60 on the R grade, but now of the 15 farms that we used for export, they were all over 80 on the R grading system. But we're on the Racemosa, so I'm going to pass you over to Charles.
I'm not sure if everybody has got the Racemosa yet. I think you will know if you have it. It's very different. One of the things I want to ask Kamal is if you can pass out the cascara on the table. It's got a crazy, very interesting smell. The Racemosa is grown all the way to sea level. We see it pretty much on the coast, in the coastal sand forests in South Africa and Mozambique. Ours grows between 70 and 150 meters above sea level. What's so interesting about the Racemosa is it flowers now in September, and we harvest it by the end of November. So from flower to fruit development to fruit ripening is 2 months. It's just unbelievable. Or 3 months, my maths is bad. But it's a very short fruit development process. Another thing that's very interesting with it is it's significantly lower caffeine, 0.7, 0.75%, somewhere between there in our test that we've done, which is about 2/3 of the way to Arabica and a lot lower than Robusta. The flavor notes I'm going to leave up to you. I don't want to put anything in your head. You'll see it's certainly not. What's so interesting about the Excelsas and the Libericas is they're not offensive in any ways, and I think that's quite important for the future of getting customers to accept them as a commercial coffee. Whereas Racemosa is so different, people are shocked by it in the beginning. So I think we need a bit of both. I think we need coffees that are exciting and are different and are introducing people to new taste profiles, but we also need coffees that aren't offensive and people are willing to accept. One of the most important things with all these new species is we cannot use what works for Arabica and Robusta and just assume it will work for these coffees. Our harvesting and our processing, especially our processing, we need to work on it and look at ways that work. I mean, Liberica, for example, there's so much sugar content in the fruit. Once you pick it, it starts to ferment straight away. So you need to harvest, you need to pulp it as soon as possible. One of the other things that is our roast profiles. We can't just take our Arabica roast profile and assume it's going to work for these tiny Racemosa beans. So there's a lot of work that we all need to do in different stages of the industry to make these coffees better and to improve them and make them acceptable to customers. We are hoping to one day get a lot of these coffees to a point where we can say to farmers, this is commercially viable, let's grow it. But it's not responsible to do that with a lot of these coffees just yet. Many of the farmers we work with are vulnerable or in vulnerable positions, and we need to be sure of what we are encouraging to grow before we send it to them to grow, so that we know that they can be commercially successful. It's not fair and it's not responsible to do it otherwise.
So this is a very interesting cup to try. Do you think it will have a big future? Or do you think it's going to be one of those coffees that we're going to see in an auction as a rare cup and people will fight for it?
Good question. I think that Racemosa certainly won't be a commercially productive coffee in terms of fixing a lot of the problems we have with coffee at the moment, purely because of its small size and small yield. But I think it has its own place. I think it will be a niche and it will be special. But as I said, I think the most important thing is what genetically can we get from it for future breeding programs as well.
I just want to say congratulations. This tastes really exciting.
Thanks.
I don't think I've ever tasted anything like it before, and I'm very excited about where you guys are going to take it. So congratulations and good luck with it. It's fantastic.
No, thank you for all being part of this. Thank you.
What about frost resistance, since it's grown so low?
I don't think where we grow it we've ever had frost. Maybe
It's
10,000 years
coastal.
ago. Yeah, coastal. It's a tropical climate. Aaron had a great photo on his presentation earlier today of these beautiful tropical islands with palm trees in the Carimba archipelago in Mozambique, and literally on the beach this coffee is drying. So frost is something we don't know anything about. I'm not sure we'll be using it for anything to do with frost tolerance. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
I would like to add upon that. No, definitely a layman, I also didn't find the breeze very unique. Congrats for bringing that. And as far as the Racemosa is concerned, we also had a breeding program centered around Racemosa. In Indian conditions, as rightly mentioned by the, we have the early ripening behavior is shown in the Racemosa. It matures within 4 months. We see flowering sometime during whenever there's a March, April, and then by July you see the ripening then. So if we wanted to use this trait for reducing the ripening behavior of Robusta, and we crossed Racemosa with Robusta, and we developed hybrids, the F1 hybrids, which is popular, the Racemosa, of course. And subsequently, from F1 to next F2 stage, we want to take forward this hybrid, but we are not successful because only F1 we don't see any seed set. That means there may be some sterility factors may be operating. And then what we did was, we crossed both with Robusta as well as with Racemosa back crosses, but they're also not successful. Maybe in our research station we have around 10 to 15 these Robusta Racemosa hybrids are there. They look like very intermediate to Racemosa and Robusta with small narrow leaves. But one interesting thing is that these hybrids also show the early ripening behavior. But when we see the natural blossom and then we see some seed set appears, that means occurs naturally. Then we try to propagate these particular naturally set seeds and we could raise some populations. And these populations interestingly looks like more of Arabicas. That means maybe it's a cross-pollinating this thing. Some of the hybrid Arabica pollen might have been dusted on this particular naturally. So again, interestingly, this particular Arabica hybrid, the looking plants also shows the early ripening behavior. So that means there is a Racemosa genome exists in this particular genotypes. So we do have this type of populations in our research station. Of course, we have not really looked into that how to exploit them as a commercially in terms of the specialty coffees. But only one minus point on Indian conditions for Racemosa is that it is highly susceptible to leaf rust. So that is the one, because most of our coffees are not grown on higher elevations, which are maybe 1200 to 1400 meters. That was most of the our Arabicas are grown. So in that elevations, we see that high susceptibility for leaf rust. Even in high rust years, we don't see any leaf on the Racemosa. Even it has been well defined that some of the, even Rust Research Center Portugal, they try to maintain the races, diploid races on Racemosa. It's highly susceptible. So that is the one minus point, if you can able to overcome this difficulty, so that it may be exploited commercially in India too. That's one of these things. Thank you.
Do you want me, I can talk about? Yeah, so many of you have probably already cupped Eugenioides. I mean, it's been in barista competitions, world barista competitions. I haven't tasted this yet. This is from Finca Inmaculada in Colombia. But pretty much the only Eugenioides producer in the world at the moment. It is produced in Kenya, in Nandi, and it's called Nandi coffee, but I don't know the status of that coffee there. I have cupped it several times, and it's blown me away every time with its super sweetness, complexity. Yeah, I'm not going to just, because every time, sometimes it's like peanut butter, sometimes it's more fruity, sometimes it's more floral, but it's always a lovely coffee to drink. And I'm going to say something about Racemosa. I think Charles really does need congratulations, because the first time I took this to be cupped, the cupping notes included urinals, sausage rolls, yeah, and it was pretty disgusting. In Boston last year, when I was with Charles, I said it was challenging, but I think what he's done with it is fantastic. Yeah, because he's the producer, and it's a shame that the guys from Finca Immaculata aren't here as well, because credit to them, they've done an amazing job. I actually think that Racemosa's got a bit more to, sometimes in the natural form. So the ones, we did a cupping of Racemosa at Zor in Geneva, and I was blown away. I loved it. It was super, super complex, really aromatic. So I think it's got that potential to, keep surprising us. But Charles, yeah, well done. So do I need to say anything more about Eugenioides? Yeah, we've known it's had a good cup quality for over 100 years. The problem has always been yield. We're looking at 200 grams of clean coffee per tree at best, maybe probably a little bit less. Small bean size, small yields. But I do think, again, like many of these coffees, it's a quick win in terms of breeding to increase yield and seed size. Those are relatively simple. Well, not simple, but it's not that complicated to do something with Eugenioides. We've got a project in Uganda at the moment, which is the center of diversity for Eugenioides, and we're trying to develop a Eugenioides sector in Uganda because there's all this variation. So we're doing field trials with Eugenioides. But as Charles says, with Racemosa in its present state, it's always going to be a niche coffee.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks, Aaron, for those kind words, which I'll be quoting you on for eternity. One of the things last year, we were in Boston with Jimmy from Immaculata, who's the farmer of Eugenioides. And Eugenioides got a great reputation with the barista competition. Like, a few baristas used it, they did really well, and it was fantastic. And it really put them on the map, although they do a lot of other great things. And then in the year following, or the year and a half following, their crop has completely collapsed of Eugenioides. They've got nothing. They produce nothing, virtually nothing. And it's been a big problem. And that's exactly why we have to be responsible when we are encouraging farmers to try new things that we know what they're getting. They know they get what they're getting themselves in for, because there is a big risk in it. And everybody must realize that it's not a quick buck to be made. It's a long-term game, and it is risky. I'm sure Jimmy and his team will bounce back, but it's been a tough road for them with it. So yeah, I think it's just something to keep in mind. Thanks.
I'd also like to add that this Eugenioides is from Immaculata, and it's the Barista Championship winning Eugenioides. So I hope you guys liked it. Any questions? Ibo?
I'll introduce yeah, because I just want to, yeah. So is it going out? It's out. Oh, not yet, okay. So the barista today is Matteo, what's Matteo's second name? Matteo Pavoli, who's very kindly brewing these coffees for us today. We're going to get Matteo to give us his impressions a bit later, but also tell us about some of the difficulties of doing something like this, and issues with water, etc. But we'll make sure he says something a bit later. Yeah, so that's going out now. And yeah. And then Charles can fill in. So those Ibu coffee's coming out now. So Ibu coffee.
Now I will send it to you. As I'm sending it, I will let you know.
Oh, so
We just talk about it. This
Okay.
is the Eugenioides that some people will get.
Oh, this is so yeah. The Eugenioides. Sorry, Ibu hasn't come out yet. It's coming next. Some people are just getting their first cup of Eugenioides. Ibu coffee, or Zanzibar coffee, is very closely related to Charles's Racemosa. Very small beans. They look very similar, green and roasted. Ibu's a slightly more robust plant. It's a sort of small tree and has slightly larger coffee beans and is higher yielding. The Ibu coffee, I have no idea what the quality is going to be like. It's probably 22 harvest, and it may have been sitting around a long time. But what I know from my visits to Ibu is the processing, the harvesting and processing still requires a lot of work. So you might pick up some quite interesting notes in the Ibu coffee, some quite negative. But again, be kind with the coffee. I'm asking you to cut past those cupping faults to try and see where the coffee is, the intrinsic value, intrinsic qualities of the coffee, rather than the harvesting and the processing. I think we've got the Ibu now, or it's coming. It's actually much better than I expected. So this is produced by very, very few smallholder farmers on Ibu and Carimbas Islands in northern Mozambique. It's been cultivated there perhaps since the 18th century. It's a coffee that's found locally, of course. And if you ever get the chance to visit Ibu or Carimbas, please do. It's the most fascinating place. And if you think you know coffee, go to Ibu and the Carimbas archipelago. So yeah, I mean, this is, it's amazing. So when I turned up by boat to Carimbas Island, I was amazed to see this coffee growing on the beach. Not wild, it's cultivated, and looking very healthy. And it was on that day, it was 43 degrees Celsius, really, really hot. But I think they've had some intervention from the Italian government and from Ili Cafe, and I think they've also done a fantastic job, because again, this Ibu coffee was challenging a few years ago, but has improved dramatically, and I think it's got a lot of mileage yet, I would say, for development.
Do we have any questions or opinions on the latest cup? No opinions? Anyone liked it? Yes?
I think perhaps
Yep.
if you did some sort of change in the step of naturals like carbonic, maybe you'll get some better flavors, because it's now more turning towards licorice. It has a sort of a medicinal note that comes up, when you take a cold medicine. I mean, it reminds me of that. It goes back to my childhood. So perhaps that's why. It has a lot of herbal, and it reminds me of dried jasmine. Keep jasmine flowers in a book and leave it for a long time, and then you open it, you get that sort of a note. I mean, I think if you change perhaps the processing a little bit, you probably will get some nice flavors, because it has the potential. I'm sure Charles will do something magical with it. I'm hoping you'll do some carbonic to it. This is also Racemosa, right? No, this is Ibo, sorry.
This is
so
Ibo, which is
probably if you do some sort of a fermentation to it, you know, I don't know, I'm just...
I think you're spot on, Mrs. Menon. The coffees are sister species, which Aaron tells me means they're extremely closely related. For 200 years, maybe, we all thought they were one species grown in different areas. Aaron proved otherwise. They are different, but they are very similar, even in their taste profile. And when we first started processing Racemosa, we had very similar notes to this. It had that medicinal licorice anise kind of taste. And then we did a fully washed, but a very, very clean wash on it. This was 2 years ago, and we got the most unbelievable cannabis notes coming out. And everybody got so excited. Even in the cafes, when we would brew it, people would think somebody was smoking a joint in the cafes because the cannabis smell was so strong. And we had so many buyers just wanted for the cannabis notes. And then, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm not sure, we did the carbonic maceration on the Racemosa now, and it's very different. We've lost that cannabis completely. We've lost the medicinal kind of notes. And I don't know what the answer is. We have so little to experiment with. And as I said, it's such a difficult bean to work with. When you put it through the pulper, you see these full cherries floating away, and you gotta catch them quickly because they're so expensive. And then you put it through the hulla, and you lose another bunch of it. And then you put it through the roaster, and it falls through the holes in the roaster. It's a nightmare. But one of the interesting things with it is we get a very low ratio of fruit to green bean, and it's about 13:1, which is not great. So we need to find a way to improve that. But I think your point stands. We need to experiment a lot more with these coffees and to see what works for them and doesn't work for them. But yeah, it's a pity we don't have more of the cannabis because it really did create an excitement. But I do think it tastes better without the cannabis. That's my personal preference.
Matteo, will you tell us a little bit about
Laurina?
Hi everyone. I'm sorry, I apologize if I was a little bit back and forth, but I'm brewing all the coffees you're tasting. So, I'm sorry, no. Thank you. But I also want to mention that the brewing part to me is the least important. Okay, so everything that happens before that I actually brew the coffee is what makes the flavor so great and unique. And just to give an introduction to myself, I'm the founder of Peacock's Coffee in Italy. So we are a specialty coffee roaster in Monza, near Milan. And I also was privileged to win the Italian Barista Championship in 2022. And the coffee that you're tasting now is the coffee that we sourced for the year after, for the World Barista Championship. And this is called Laurina. I don't know if you ever heard about this varietal before. Very simply, I didn't know about it either. And I asked Felipe Arcila, who's the producer of this coffee, what it's all about. Also, I really want to mention that I'm not a coffee grower or a scientist, so I don't have the background and the expertise about growing varietal and species as they do. But I am really curious, so I ask questions and I get excited about different coffee species. Also, as a barista, I think when you taste something new, you get really, really excited, really easily. And so Laurina, to me, was that kind of experience. And the reason why it's so special is because it's an Arabica varietal that has a very low percentage of caffeine. So it naturally develops around 0.3%. This specific lot, I don't really know how much caffeine is inside, but is pretty much 0.3. And the caffeine usually is associated with bitter compounds in the cup when we taste it. So Robusta usually has more caffeine and we tend to taste more bitterness. In this Laurina, I think the bitterness is almost non-existent. It's very sweet, very clean and delicate. But the thing that excites me the most when brewed as espresso was the body and the syrupiness you have when you taste the espresso shot. Obviously, as a filter, it's very delicate, very gentle, but I think it's a wonderful coffee. The problem is that from a producer perspective, Laurina isn't the best choice always because of its low caffeine content. It also has a very delicate plant, so it's very easily to get attacked by animals or insects. So the yield of this plant isn't really high. And that's also the reason why it's very expensive as a coffee. The first Laurina that I tested was actually from a farm in Colombia called Granja La Esperanza. It's quite a popular farm in the World Barista Championship as well. And this one is actually from a different farm in the same region, from the Quindío area, and the farm is called Jardines del Eden. The elevation is 1,850 meters above sea level, and it has two fermentation stages. The first 24 hours are in aerobic environment, and then 48 hours into anaerobic environment. During this time, nothing is added to the fermentation tank, so it's an anaerobic environment with no yeast added to it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about Laurina. I really love this coffee, and I hope you are enjoying it. If you have any questions, you can feel free to ask.
Is this different from Bourbon LC?
I think it's called Bourbon Point 2, but they call it now Laurina.
Yeah, okay. Because we do have the Laura in our Gene Plant collection, and also you might be remembering that Dr. Sondal from Brazil, he was popularizing the Bourbon LC. No, that's a thing. Okay, I was asking maybe the same.
So I think this is probably why some of you came here today, because this is now Stenophylla is coming out, Coffea stenophylla. And I just want to provide a bit of historical context on this coffee. This was exported from Upper West Africa, Guinea-Conakry, Sierra Leone, and Ivory Coast to Europe at a premium at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And because it had that premium over Arabica, it was kind of almost the first specialty coffee. Now, I've been interested in Stenophylla for about 20 years, and what started my interest was a line in a quote in a book, and it said in French, but of course translated, that the taste is better than Arabica. And that, to anybody who's interested in coffee, of course, that's extremely compelling. We wanted to cup Stenophylla. We wanted to find Stenophylla in the wild, in Sierra Leone, or Upper West Africa. But the civil war went on for some years. When that finished, Ebola struck. So it wasn't really until so colleagues of mine started looking in 2015 for this coffee, 2016, during the Ebola era. But it wasn't until late 2018 we had a chance to have a really extensive search for Stenophylla coffee in Sierra Leone. I'll cut the story short, but we did find the coffee in 2018, and people were excited, I was excited, but what we didn't come back with was a cupping sample, which was very frustrating. And when we published our first paper, we still had no idea of the flavor profile. Then in 2020, we were able to get a very small cupping sample, 12 grams, of which we were able to produce a small amount of coffee to cup, and I cupped this with Union Coffee in East London. It was a silent cupping, of course, and we were asked to write down our thoughts on the coffee and share them afterwards. And what I said to my colleague Jeremy Hagar and Daniel Sermu from Sierra Leone, I said, look, if this tastes okay, then that's fine. We'll be happy. My first sip, it was a revelatory moment because I was kind of so surprised. Anyway, we went through the cupping. The head cupper lifted up her pad, and she'd written, washed Rwandan Arabica. I lifted up my notebook. I had exactly the same. And Matteo's just whispered in my ear, washed Rwandan Arabica, a Bourbon. Red Bourbon, fantastic, Red Bourbon. And that's just incredible. So I didn't think, so this is a copy from West Africa, but it's turned up in India. It's been at the research center, and I'm absolutely amazed that they've managed to find and produce this cupping sample today. Absolutely delighted, and vindicated that it does. We have been able to repeat that result. And what also excites me, what really excites me, other than the flavor profile, is that this is a coffee growing at in West Africa at 200 to 400 meters. Yet it's producing a profile that's akin to a high elevation Rwandan Bourbon, Red Bourbon. And that to me is incredible. As well as that, if you look at the temperature tolerance of Stenophylla, it's at least 6 degrees Celsius higher. So what I mean by so that's the mean annual temperature. So when I turned up with Professor Hagar in Sierra Leone, I said, coffee can't grow here. It's just too hot. And it was like mid-30s that day. And I just said, I can't believe it. But there it is. So it grows in an environment that's much, much hotter than Arabica, hotter than Robusta. It's difficult to grow good quality Robusta in Sierra Leone. And it grows in a seasonal environment. So the rainfall is quite high, but it's able to withstand a dry season of around 4 months. And when we start to think about climate projections, and we start to think about real climate resiliency, if you have a coffee that can produce a profile that's like Arabica, but nearly 7 degrees maximum temperature higher, then it starts to become really exciting. The drawback with Stenophylla is its low yield. The beans themselves are slightly smaller than Arabica, but the yield is low. So I think it has huge potential as a niche coffee like Lorena or Racemosa or Eugenioides, higher yielding than any of those. But I think its real potential is in breeding, crossing with other species to produce climate resilient coffees. We've got 2 more coffees, yeah. And if anybody has any questions. So Stenophylla has a wide range of rainfall tolerance, or its envelope of rainfall is very, very broad, from 1,600 meters up to 3,000 in altitude. But the interesting thing is that it will grow at high temperatures under the same rainfall regime as an Arabica. 1,600 millimeters. Yeah. Yeah. Is anybody else getting the Red Bourbon, the Rwandan? Sorry? The Stenophylla. Oh, you're on to Liberica now, are you? Ah, okay.
It was definitely shocking. It was tasting like a clean, washed coffee with the classic notes. Like if somebody didn't tell us where this coffee was coming from, we would have not thought. So you could say it's like 83, 84 washed Arabica coffee. So yeah, you might not get the cleanest notes, but you get clean cup with a very balanced notes.
Thank you. That's good feedback. And you have to remember, this is not being produced by a coffee grower or a producer or a high-end specialty producer. This has come from the research station. So that's, I would say, pretty amazing. They're on the Liberica already.
Yeah, it's a surprise for me that first I should thank the CCRA for making a nice sample from this, because we do have the Stenophillas in our gene bank. Maybe I don't know. I remember that one of our very senior most breeder, he has a fancy that he used to prepare coffee from all the leaves of different species, like tea. They always used to tell that the Stenophylla is different, Prakash, something I'm relishing it by making the leaves, he boils the leaves and telling. But now I'm really, it came to know that no, really, it has some different flavor. But the sample came from maybe around 1,000 meters, that is elevation whatever research stations, nearly 1,000 meters. And you know, gene bag, the performance is little hardy. What I agree with Dr. Davis that no, we see the huge bushes. We don't see because in fact our research station is a rust factory. We have almost like 23 identified races are distributed in our research station. So whichever genotype or whichever the coffee type which shows tolerance this particular research station, definitely it performs better in planters fields. So under that circumstances also, in that scenario, even the Stenophylla we never saw leaf rust. And the second aspect, of course, the drought, whatever, of course, we have not really looked much in detail regarding drought hardy, but we found that this particular species is a little hardy. But maybe after this, the cup scoring or the unique profile, maybe it's interesting to exploit commercially. But one challenging factor is that in under shade-grown condition in India, the gestation period is little high. That means achieving the economic potential of the plant is little slow compared to the open conditions. There's the one limitation. Otherwise, it looks very interesting, this Stenophylla. And in fact, Stenophylla was also extensively used in the breeding program, but we were not successful in developing a fertile hybrids. That was the one limitation in terms of this thing. Okay, that's right. Yeah. Scene or anything that I want to brief later on, I will just. Yeah. And last one was like the previous one comes
So,
yeah.
so there's this super sweet licorice stick is the Liberica. I can't. Where did you get this from? This is from Malaysia. Oh, this is Indian grown. Is it? That's fantastic.
This is an Arabica.
Liberica.
Last one, okay.
Are people trying this at the moment, the Liberica?
Yeah, this is from Coorg. Yeah.
This is from Cork.
Yeah.
Would you like to? Yeah. I mean, I've had
In India.
I've cupped quite a lot of Liberica. I've never cupped anything like this.
Yeah.
It's so sweet.
Yeah.
And,
You find
and
interesting?
liquid
Yeah.
and fruity,
Yeah.
but not tropical fruity.
Yeah, yeah.
That's amazing.
No, it's a bulk sample from the Liberica grown and research station in Coorg. Okay. Yeah. And
Liberica, right? When was the last time that tasted like Robusta?
Ubiquity, no. No, that's right. No, from the genus is sweet process. That's from research station. But this is from, in a research form in Chattogram. It's like a process. It's not a block. I told you, it is in the state fences. Yeah, they collect for the bulk sample.
It's very sweet.
Sorry, we've been asking a lot of questions, but would these coffees be treated as its own thing down the future, or people will try to convert it to a bit Arabica-like coffee?
I mean, I don't know about you, but whoever's had any Liberica before, but to me, I would do anything with a flavor profile. I think it's so interesting. But yeah, I think some of them you might want to work with the flavor profile, and some of them you want to work with the agronomy, the yield, pest and disease resistance. So I think it depends. So we were just having this discussion. We're not quite sure. As I said earlier, Liberica is a real mixed bag of things. And this is so unlike what I call traditional Liberica that I'm kind of wondering exactly what it might be.
I have a farm that's been in the family for about 100 years, and I found in the entrance, like, I think it's 15 or 20 Libericas that one of my uncles must have brought from somewhere. And in my 8 years of owning the farm, I haven't been able to taste it.
Wow.
And I fertilize it, and I talk to it, and I do anything, and I think I think I will have my first, tasteable crop this year, like right now.
Yeah.
So in December. So I'll shoot you a note.
Yeah, let us know. But yeah, so as I say, I've never tasted any Liberica like this before. So it's going to be interesting to work on this a bit more and see exactly what it is. But yeah, it's just so licoricey and so sweet. Is anybody getting that sweetness?
It's like a maple syrup.
It's like a maple syrup. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I'm excited because I haven't tasted this before, and I wouldn't. This is just the amazing thing about species.
We were speaking about the blind cupping, and then when you drink blindly, not knowing.
Yeah. But I can't believe I'm still being surprised after all these years. It's like I've never tasted anything like that.
That's the best part about coffee.
Yeah. I mean, it's not everybody's thing, but.
This is like the best drinking game ever.
Yeah, it's doing these cuppings is very difficult at this scale, and Matteo and Kamal and the team have done a fantastic job. Yeah. But I realised there was a little bit of confusion, and we're sorry about that. And cupping, I think you need to concentrate, don't you? You need to quiet room, and it'd be great to do this again. Maybe in smaller groups, where we can sort of focus and take notes and be absolutely sure of what we're tasting. Yes.
Sorry, this is a bit of a broader question, but I think coffees like this, in your perspective or from your perspective, obviously you said in the beginning we can't see it as an Arabica, and there's now a scoring system for Robustas, and that's great. But what do you see in the value assessment for alternative species, and what could that look like? Because obviously there's value linked to it for
so
producers.
I can give you a real example. So the Ugandan Excelsa comes from Robusta producers. They've been producing it, I think, for like 3 or 4 decades, or maybe even longer, but not at scale. But anyway, let's say they've been producing it for 30 or 40 years. It's just gone into the Robusta, the lot, mixed with Robusta in Uganda. But what we were able to do with our recent project is to put extra value on the Excelsa. So we're separating the Excelsa out, and they were getting like 3,500 Ugandan shillings per kilo of Chiboko, dry cherry, for their Robustas. They're now getting 5,500. So, it's worth. They wouldn't do it if they didn't think, if they weren't making money out of it. Sorry, that was the Excelsior. So the price, it was, again, it's early stage, but the price buyers are willing to pay for Excelsior is much higher than at the farm gate than at Robusta. And I should point out that these, of the 200 farms that we're working with, they have transitioned from Robusta to Excelsior purely on the basis that Robusta's not working for them anymore. And when you spoke to them, the common themes come out time and time again. It's high yielding. It has a good outturn. It's pest and disease resistant. It's easy to look after. It's long lived. It's robust. It's drought tolerant. Which is just what you want to hear. But that, if you add that to the extra value, from my perspective, that's pretty remarkable. Again, this is not something that's being pushed on them to do. They're doing it themselves, for themselves, without any intervention. And if you look at the history of coffee cultivation in Uganda, Ugandan farmers have done that for a long time. So they were told to grow Arabica, and right from the outset they said, this isn't going to work for us. They had a long history of growing Robusta, and eventually they were proved right. And that's why Uganda's a Robusta producer, primarily a Robusta producing country. So that, the farmers, they know what they're doing. And they're making the right decisions. So, one time, Arabica was pushed out right the way across lowland Uganda by the government, the protectorate government at that time, and it completely failed. And then it was pushed up to Elgon and Ruwenzori, which is, of course, where it grows today. But the farmers, they know what they're doing.
This is the last copy of the session, which all of y'all have tasted.
So the last coffee is 4595. It's a new variety by Coffee Board. I don't think it's received mass adoption yet. Dr. Surya Prakash is going to tell us a little bit about this coffee. It's actually really, really interesting.
First of all, I would like to know your feedback. How is the cup of this particular variety?
Yeah, it's easy to drink, right? Chocolate-covered oranges.
It's good? Okay. Yeah. In fact, it's a derivative of the diploid interspecific hybrid between Liberica and Eugenioides. Okay. And in fact, the F1s we have on the resuscitation, that they looks like intermediate to Liberica and also Eugenioides. The plants looks like intermediate. And it happened sometime during 70s. One fine morning, the breeders could see one shoot, that means the orthotropic shoots, what we call suckers, looks like Arabica. It's like no polyploidization has happened, maybe that was the thing. Then out of interest, they covered with a selfing bag. So it bred through. That means it may be a tetraploid. That was a simple indication what they were doing. So they tried to germinate these particular seeds. And also the second aspect they cloned this particular sucker and generated a few plants from that. And when the progeny was raised from the seeds, they looks like more of plants which intermediate to Eugenioides and Arabica with narrow leaf. And then this population has found tolerance to leaf rust. So with that particular perspective, because up to 1980s, the most of our breeding program was, I was mentioning about the leaf rust. Any variety which are showing promise against the leaf rust, they had a special focus on that. So like that, this particular variety was given a special focus. And only the negative aspect of this particular variety was the small bean size. So we used to get more of B grades around. Then to increase the size of the bean, we crossed with the different progenies, the different Arabica lines like Timor hybrid, Tafarikella, Sivosi, Agaro, like a lot of Ethiopian collections. And interestingly, the two populations what we developed from this particular Liberica eugenetis hybrid versus Timor hybrid is the derivative what you have tasted. In addition to that, we do have an hybrid between this Liberica eugenetis derivative with Alamo HDT. There is another hybrid. So that line is also looks promising. And up to 90s, most of our focus was on the leaf rust. But interestingly, subsequent late 90s, there was a lot of demand from the planting community that because the stem borer, which is the pest unique to the Indochina region, especially the India, is creating havoc on Arabica plantations, and we were looking for the resistance sources for this particular pest. And interestingly, what we found that this Liberica eugenetis hybrid, as well as these derivatives of this eugenetis hybrids with Timor hybrid, are showing some tolerance for pest, this particular stem borer pest. So from that onwards, we did systematically monitoring these particular populations, and we developed a bioassay technique where we can screen these populations against this pest. We released the caged release of the pest, and we got very good promising result. And this line is looking very promising in field conditions. Now we reached a stage that we are following two approaches. One approach is that a true breeding strategy, we have advanced this particular line up to F3 generation, and that are being tested in the planters fields. And the second approach is by using the tissue culture. We are the F1 hybrids, the first generation, what we have this line also, we multiplied and planted in 27 locations, and they are being monitored for the stem borer tolerance. In addition to that, after Akshay has been now was interested much on this Liberica and agent, we got new information. Then we had focused on this particular line, and the sample was given how it tastes because with respect to the cup quality characteristics. And the sample came from in a not a high elevation. It's around 2,800 feet. That means around 900 feet, the meter elevation in one of the research stations from Andhra Pradesh, which is very marginal area, and and we don't see such a high rainfall like in traditional areas. So the sample came from that areas. So maybe it's, based on your feedback, we may have to see much closer look at this particular variety in the other locations where, because we planted in Coorg, we planted in Chikmagalur area, in all these regions, this particular variety is there. So not for the cup quality point of view, but in terms of stem borer tolerance, this particular variety is gaining high significance. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Surya Prakash. So that's the last of the samples. If anyone has any questions, this is a good time to ask them.
I just want to say that it's a real privilege for us to be in this room today. I feel like there's some kind of history that's been happening today, and like it's deeply humbling to be able to have this experience. I think we're all going to remember it for a very long time. And congratulations and thank you to all the work that you guys are doing to really help us pave a path forward for our industry, and like, just thank you. Thank you.
I just have one question to Dr. Surya Prakash. What's the significance of numbers? 4595. I mean, it's so nice to hear of Ibu and, things like that. So I was wondering, what is the reason why you have numbers? 4595, very difficult to remember it.
Yeah, normally we follow a system that, prior to the release of any particular genotype for commercial cultivation, we still consider it as a research material. So any new material which has brought into the accession, into the research station, or maybe generated, we give an accession number called S4595. That's meant that we crossed almost 5,000 series. So it's a tracking number from subsequently. When we found that it is commercially prospective, then we give particular name, and like Chandragiri, it is such more derivative. When we found that it's a promising, then we release it on a particular name. So only after this multi-location trial we get a validated information about the stem borer tolerance. That's the reason why still in the evaluation stage. Once it passes all our tests, then we may be released on a particular name. That's the only way.
Thank you, because
Thank you.
eternally we remember numbers and we always get confused with numbers.
That is the secret of breeders, madam.
Oh, okay.
We want to confuse you.
I know, I love that. Thank you.
No,
No, the same way we gave selection 13, I believe, became Chandragiri. What is there anything you're looking to dub 4595? Because I don't want it to become like 795. After all these years, we're still calling it 795. So a name like Chandragiri would be good.
Yeah, this giving a particular name started from Katimos onwards, because prior to that we used to give only selection 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. Then this question came, and then that time the management decided that okay, in order to popularize a particular variety, we need a popular name. So then the Katimos were released on the name of Kaveri. Then that was the selection 12, and the section 13 was released as Chandragiri. Okay. Then if at all we are going to release it 4595, it may become selection 14 and on any particular promising name. Okay. That's it.
Probably you can call it Surya.
No, madam.
After
no,
you.
as you know that this coffee breeding is not a credit of any single person. We have seen the people sacrifice their lives, especially in a tall varieties. It's a very long-term breeding program. Almost 20 years it took. It started in 95, I remember. The first crosses they made with Liberica and United, with HDT, and then subsequently they're taken forward. And like that, no single person can take the credit, but it is a team effort.
No,
That's
but
all these,
Surya means the sun, so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
that's
referring to
not
you.
mine,
I'm only
but
referring
Surya
to the
means
sun.
no. Yeah, I do agree, but no, it depends on because so far the Kaveri was a river, and Chandragiri has a significance in terms of the first introduction of coffee to India in Chandragiri mountains in Chikmagalur region. Like that, some significant name they may have brought in. Okay. Thank you, madam.
So I think we are running out of time now. Last chance. Any questions? Oh, right. Okay. Right, I'm sorry. The chances are over. Yep. But we'd like to thank everyone involved, primarily the organizers, Coffee Board for the species, some of the species. Yolanda for Ebo Coffee, Immaculada for the Eugenoides, Charles for the Racemosa, and Union for...
A lot of the coast coffees are roasted by Union Hand Roasted Coffee in London at very short notice. I'd also like to thank, as you say, Dr. Yolanda Almeida from Mozambique for sending us the Ebo coffee. I'd like to thank the producers in Luero for the Excelsa, particularly Job Walubiri, who's the field agent who works with the farmers. I'd also like to thank Equatorial Teak Company, and particularly Ian Patterson, for sending us the other Excelsa sample. I think that's the ones. Oh, and a huge thank you to Matteo. And he flew in last night. These coffees, apart from Lorena and perhaps in Eugenioides, are pretty unknown to you, and he's done a fantastic job. So a big round of applause for Matteo.
Thanks, everyone. I just want to say thanks for joining, and I feel, just as you said, I feel very lucky to be part of this, and yeah, I feel it's kind of a history being making, and the only thing I want to say is the brewing part, as I mentioned before, to me isn't the most important thing, but surely these coffees can taste even better than what I did, because as you know, there are many variables like brewing water, temperature, degassing time, so many variables to make a great cup of coffee. So we really didn't really dial into each of these. We just brewed it the best way we could, but I think they can taste even better than they did.
Can I make just one quick big thank you to Kamal, who's working behind the scenes, and Akshay, who put this whole thing together. Fantastic job.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, sir, for the wonderful sessions here. May I please request Dr. Madhapa to give away the mementos to the presenters.
Last word, I should thank Dr. Mandappa for his very... because unfortunately, because we were we lost the opportunity because we have a very, very interesting materials on resuscitation. I never knew that because we could not able to prepare the samples. But now I realized that no, why the Coog Excels or so-called Liberica is giving a unique cup because of the processing. So I acknowledge the great efforts we have. We have very good farm labor, experts in preparing the on-farm coffee of the research samples. That's the one thing. And that may be the, even from the CCRA, I compliment the team of the youngsters who have prepared the sample. Though we informed a bit late, they could able to get the Stenophylla and other species. Otherwise, if we had informed little earlier, we could have got much more interesting samples. So I compliment all the scientists, young scientists from CCRA who have taken special effort in preparing the samples. And also the Mandappa who has been always pushing us. Thank you once again. I hope that we'll get another opportunity where our specialty coffees, because most of the new breeding lines will be, especially the diploid interspecific hybrids, which will get to give more focus in terms of the specialty coffees. Okay, thank you.
A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, please. So all of them for a quick photograph. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. I request all of you all to have the next conversations with all these amazing people outside, and we can